Welcome to DDL. I'm Justin. This is T. We're going to get into it.
Welcome to Wellspring Wednesdays. Side conversations were going on, but it's okay. I like it. It's authentic.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
introduce what we're doing today, bud.
We're going to be getting into the hot topic of, obviously, with Trump's recent discussion on IVF, kind of sparked that. So we'll be getting into the morality of it and what that sort of looks like from, different perspectives, me coming from the Christian perspective and just overall morality and how it's going to impact our nation.
Yeah. Morality, I think, is a big part of it. Ethics. Those kind of go hand in hand, actually.
Yeah.
But the technological advances made in medical, I think, is a portion that we have to discuss as well.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we're going to be getting some. Oh, come on. Oh, it doesn't work. Stupid. I got to play with this. I'm going to have to play with it. Crap. I am out of town literally until I leave Tuesday morning, and I'm not going to be back until like Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
So I have no idea when I'm going to get a chance to play with this computer and make it all work better.
Hey, that's all right. We'll make do with what we have.
Fair. All right. So you want to give a quick intro as to what Trump did?
Did he rule that it was going to be mandatory for companies to carry insurance for IVF specifically? I believe.
So he basically gave two options. So for some weird reason, Trump got on the IVF kick, and he said that either the government will pay for it, or the government is going to mandate insurance companies to pay for it.
Right. Okay. That's right.
So,
yeah,
I think the logical place to start would be: do you agree with Trump or do you disagree with Trump in whether or not the government should play a role or the government should mandate that the insurance agencies play a role?
Again, I go back to I think that's personal issue, states' rights issue. And if Trump's going to sit there and tell us, hey, abortion is a states' rights issue, we're not going to do any federal mandates. Well, guess what? I think that covers this. I think having the federal government involved in either mandating or telling insurance companies that they have to cover these things, it's, again, look, man, this should be a personal issue. This should be a states' rights issue. And this should be a healthcare issue between you and your provider. And if your provider's not going to cover you for that, well, maybe you should find one that will. It's part of the competitive marketplace.
Yeah, 100%. It is part of the competitive marketplace. However, the government has always interfered with insurance companies.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not we go as far as saying a mandate is a need be, I guess is a little bit argumentative from my stance, meaning that Obamacare was a huge failure on our insurance companies.
Yeah.
So anytime the government outright makes a mandate, we're probably going to have an issue. However, I think there could be encouragements done on the government in forms of tax breaks or subsidization that could encourage providers or insurance providers to cover it.
Yeah.
I think there is a way without being a federal mandate.
Yeah, and again, I go back to it's just a weird side quest for Trump to hop on.
I agree.
Okay, why in vitro fertilization specifically? Why not adoption costs? Why not helping out with some of foster families? Why is there no discussion of helping out in those areas? Because I feel like those are areas that actually need reformation, and we don't necessarily need the IVF side of things to be reformed right now.
I don't know if I would fully agree with you on that statement.
No.
Not saying that you're wrong on the adoption or foster. Obviously, that does. We had a huge conversation last week about that. But I almost feel that the IVF actually does play a pivotal role in our society right now. And this comes into play with the simple fact that our eating habits and the use of plastics, the endocrine disruptors and everything that is going on, making fertilization or people being able to get pregnant drastically reduced, and the simple fact that we are underwater when it comes to replenishment rates for childbirths.
Right.
I believe that IVF actually is a good conversation to have. However, I don't know if I would fully go as far as what Trump's trying to say right now.
Right. And that's more, I think, first things first, we need to encourage, existing life to be taken care of, which is the adoption and the foster care system. Now, as far as helping other couples to get pregnant, I'll go back to my mother being an example. When she ended up, being adopted, the couple that adopted her was not able to have kids. They adopted her, instantly had my aunt, and from there, it's you look at it and it's that's pretty common of a story. It's once the mother has those hormones producing within her because of an adoption, they kind of naturally flow out, and then it's a lot easier for them usually to have children. And it could be a number of things, like you were talking about, a lot of the issues as far as why it's harder for people to have kids now with, plastics and all that. But again, it could be something as simple as, hey, how do we kickstart this hormone? And a lot of times it is people who are in those positions where they care for other people's children. Once it becomes, something that they can own, it's completely different, and so, yeah.
I don't necessarily disagree with you on that one. Yeah. Because there are plenty of stories where that actually happens.
Yeah. And I think the focus is, let's concentrate on the life that's living right now and take care of that. And hey, the technological aspect, I'm okay with pursuing some of those things to help couples for sure.
Yeah. Whether or not, I think where I'm going with is, this is not going to be an issue where it's going to stop. It is going to continue to move forward. So with it moving forward, it obviously enters into the question of, what's the morality of it, right? So I'm looking at it like IVF. There's typically multiple embryos that are viable.
Right.
Now, if you are of the persuasion that life begins at conception, that is technically a life, which means if it ends, it's an abortion, which is where some of the morality comes into play. And then that obviously begs the question of, what do you ethically do with the embryos that are not chosen?
Right.
Do they get recycled? Do they get donated to people that cannot have a viable embryo made?
Well, and from my research, it showed that if it is a viable embryo, generally they will inject multiple embryos within the mother, and the ones that aren't viable, they will discard. Yeah. And so again, how are we going about that? Are we doing it with the actual mother and father? Are we using that as a way to help fertilize the mother, or are we doing it through more unnatural means? How scientific are we getting? And the further we get away from, one sperm, one egg, that sort of thing, how it was originally created to be, that's where I think we start kind of getting into maybe the issues that came about with cloning, where we're almost kind of trying to step in and play God and say, hey, we can create life ourselves without the natural order of things. So
that's an interesting take. I would almost push back a little bit though, and say that with all endeavors, since I'm going to be coming at it from more of an agnostic point of view,
sure,
if there was a creator that created us in their image, and gave us the knowledge and forthright to continue advancing and becoming more like them, would the next logical step not be that, hey, the knowledge that they imparted into us led to us being able to do this? Would that not be a logical step that's saying that that person actually is not wanting us to play God per se, but is actually letting us fulfill our destiny of reaching the attainment that they wanted us to reach?
And, I guess that could be an argument, but as far as the perspective of, okay, well, now that I have made life on my own in a scientific laboratory, who are you now to tell me what I can and can't do with that life? And then you literally are able to play God and say, I can do whatever I want with this human life because God didn't help me make it. I created it.
That's an interesting counter argument to that.
Yeah. And that's where it gets scary to me. Yeah. Ooh. What's the logical outworking of it? Yeah.
That was good. I like that one. That was deep.
Yeah.
Holy crap. Yeah. So because at that point, I'm going to put some thought into that. That's an interesting take.
Yeah. And again, I don't no, that's good. And again, I don't know how that necessarily plays out, but I'm thinking down the road, because right now it's like, oh yeah, that sounds like a great option, but okay, what does this look like as it plays out through society and morality? And generally, it's like, maybe if we keep our hands off of it, that's actually better for us as a society and a culture.
Interesting.
Yeah. So,
well, the next step, right? Obviously, we're covering some of the morality, some of the ethical issues is in the play. Is, let's say that 20 embryos are made,
right?
5 are, or 10 are viable.
Sure.
The other 10 are discarded.
Right.
They implant 5 of those 10 that are viable, and the woman becomes pregnant.
Right.
With 2 of them.
Right.
Are actually attached, and she's carrying twins.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there's going to be some. Okay, well, we only wanted 1. Well, at that point,
right
there's where some of the issue comes into play in my mind.
Right.
But let's say, like, for the sake of argument, they decide to keep both. The other 3 do not take. Okay, that's natural. Right. Sometimes they don't take and hold.
Right.
But what happens to the 5 that were not implanted? They say, okay, we are having twins and we don't want to try this again. Right. What happens to them?
And that's where, from the research I did, again, I'm not fully knowledgeable on it. Generally what I saw was, hey, we can freeze these. They made it more, because I watched a laboratory, and they're how they handle things, and it was basically like, hey, if the mother really wants to, we can freeze some of these embryos. Okay, great. Well, what if the mother doesn't want to freeze some of those embryos? Are you still going to freeze them? Yeah. And so once the paperwork is signed over to the lab, like what do they do with them? I don't know.
So this is an interesting conundrum that I've thought of, which is, let's say that a man and a woman decide to do IVF. Yeah. They get embryos made. Yeah. And before the implantation step, they end up breaking up. Right. Right. Now, the woman decides, I'm going to go ahead and have this child. Right. Even though we're no longer together. How does that play with the man? Because he's no longer actively willing to do this. He might have said, I don't want to, during the divorce proceedings, like, hey, we were doing this or whatnot. Or maybe he just forgot about it or whatnot. So what kind of legal ramifications actually happen in that case then? Right.
And that's where I'm sure I guarantee the lab is going to have their side covered. Like, hey, you signed this paperwork. Yep. And so they're going to be very black and white about it. And but then again, yeah, it could be used against somebody and hey, you have to pay child support. Yep. Well, that was when we were dating. I felt that was kind of, that's what I wanted. But now that we're broken up, no, it's almost like stealing someone's sperm, for lack of a better term. Yeah. Which sounds weird to say, but yeah, that's why this whole topic opens up a lot of really gray areas. 100%. And that's where I go back to, maybe we should take a step back from it instead of just going, yeah, let's keep moving forward with the technology. Very similar to AI.
Yeah. Like, I was actually just going to bring that up.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, because you hit it right on the head. It is very similar to AI. Yeah. We should probably take a step back, but we're not doing that.
Yeah. We're just pushing full force. And I'm just like, did anybody watch Terminator 2? Anybody, please tell me you watched Terminator 2. We see what plays out when we allow machines to have free rule and reign and go, hey, do what you want and start making decisions for yourself. It generally doesn't turn out well because from an analytical facts and figures side of things, guess what? Humans kind of are terrible for the planet. We're terrible to each other. We're capable of all sorts of evil. Absolutely. Now, that's part of the redemption story and what I believe, we can also be capable of many great and good things. However, the net effect of humans is destruction. It is bad things happening in the world. And if you're running ones and zeros, you might look at a human and go, yeah, it's kind of better if I take out most humans because,
if not all.
Yeah, because they're not a net positive for, and the AI could just be like, for the earth, for the sake of the earth, it's better just not to have humans around. Yeah. So yeah.
No, that's an interesting take, man. Yeah. And I don't disagree with it. I mean, we are a net negative as a species. Yeah. What's that? Yeah, Ultron. It is interesting, though, that as we continue to progress in our technological endeavors, we keep running into these issues of morality. And I'm not saying like we shouldn't explore these,
right?
But sometimes I agree with you. I think we need to slow down a little bit and actually think of the ramifications. Because Trump brought IVF up to the forefront by making that declaration that he made, which I have no idea why he did. But there are moral and ethical questions that should be answered. So what happens to those embryos that are not used?
Yeah.
Can they be donated to other people so other people can have children? It's almost similar to, as like adoption, right?
Right.
But what happens when we get to the point where, I mean, we're fairly close, probably within, 10, 15 years, I would imagine that we're going to have artificial wombs.
Yeah. Yeah. Capable of holding and sustaining life.
Yeah. But what does that look like to the child?
Right.
Because there's a lot of biological functions that the mother's body does.
Yes.
That can we really replicate in an artificial womb?
Right. And that's kind of, again, it goes back to the study that was done. I can't remember. I believe it was a German scientist who basically neglected children. He did not play with them. He did not touch them. They were fed. They were physically given everything that they needed, but touch was withheld from them, and they all died. And it's basically a study that says, hey, you can provide every physical need that a child has, but if you're not actually touching and playing and engaging with them, same thing in that back and forth within the womb. Well, maybe we tried to bring some of those embryos to life, and then they made it to 6 months of gestation, and then all of a sudden they just died. And this is great for science because we found that out, and now we can progress and learn. And it's like, yeah, but what about those innocent lives that you created as a lab experiment? To me, it's just like, are we crossing boundaries with that? And should we instead of say, hey, let's make sure this stuff's funded by the insurance companies, should we maybe take a step and go, hold on, should we maybe think down the road and think maybe let's set some safeguards and some boundaries on this before we just wholesale approve it? And so, yeah.
That's actually a really good point. I do like the fact that, like, you brought up, like, or when you were talking, it actually reminded me, like, sometimes how babies are born and they don't cry. It's not like they're breathing.
Right.
And they pretty much say, hey, it's a stillborn.
Yeah.
And they give it to the mother to comfort.
Right.
And then all of a sudden just wakes up.
Oh, wow.
Starts breathing, right? Have you ever seen that?
No.
Oh,
it makes sense, but yeah, I haven't heard of that.
It's really weird. It's just like the mother's warmth and then hearing the heartbeat or whatever it is. It creates some sort of response where that baby starts actually responding.
Wow.
So
that's powerful. Yeah.
My thought is when we get to the point where we're in artificial wombs, what are we ending up doing to these children?
Right. Right.
We're taking the biological aspect out of it. We have no idea what's going to happen. Right. And in all reality, the only way we're going to know is by doing that, is by creating a lab experiment on innocent children.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, is it worth doing?
To me,
to you, it's no. To me, it's like, I'm struggling because it's a life. You really shouldn't be using a life like that.
Right. Especially human life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, that if there was some way that it was like we could simulate it and it wasn't actually human life, okay, maybe, but man, that's a human in there.
It's hard to simulate something you have no knowledge on, right?
Right.
Yeah. That's interesting. You're bringing up simulation when we could. You ever heard of simulation theory?
Yes. Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Are we living in a simulation?
I thought it was fascinating when it was brought up in the Matrix original movie, but then the Wachowski brothers became the Wachowski sisters, and it's one of those things where I look at it and I'm like, you guys got ate up by whatever that wormhole was, and you went from brilliant film creators to I can't even describe Because I don't know if you watched The Matrix Reloaded or,
I wanted to, but I ended up not doing it.
Yeah, no, the terrible movies. So in theory, like, hey, this is all a simulation or this is some part of a program. It's fascinating to think about, but then, how does that play out in how you treat other people? Yeah.
100%. I'm just checking this out because we're getting more glitchy as we progress. Oh, I'm going to have to do some work on this computer. Unfortunate. I apologize that the video quality is not up to where it should be, guys. That's my fault. Probably should have. Yeah. My bad.
All right.
I'm a little disappointed that
that's all right.
We didn't get the computer. I didn't get the computer up, and I had a busy week.
Hey.
The fair was going on. So, sorry, we're going to go off topic for you for a second.
Sure.
Fair is going on. Daughter's in 4-H.
Okay.
And first event, she wins first place.
Oh, nice.
For showmanship.
Okay.
On horses. She goes and competes for the grand champion, wins the grand champion.
Nice.
Yeah, so
wow. Proud papa moment there. Yeah.
She did pretty good at the fair. She placed in every single one of her events from first. I think their lowest was a 5th place finish. Wow. Yeah, so she did good.
Great.
Sorry, but yeah. So I ended up having a long week because trying to handle work, trying to handle family, and being everywhere I needed to be. I put on about 2,200 miles this week alone.
Yeah.
Just driving from where I needed to be to get back. And so.
Yeah.
Apologies.
No worries. You're good there.
Oh, excuse me. So, getting back on topic. IVF definitely not going away.
Right. Not now.
So the question is, what do we do with it?
Yeah. And that's where, again, we can get into the discussion on morality and also, hey, what does that look like going forward? I don't know. For me, I don't know that it's a black and white issue, but technology seems to be raising a lot of other problems as well. And if we could branch out into the trans debate as well. Okay. Now that it's viable for you to have cosmetic surgery, either genitalia wise, top surgery, changing your jawline, taking hormones, doing these things that weren't available 100 years ago made it so a lot less people would identify that way.
Okay.
And ultimately, is identifying as trans a net positive or a net negative? I think being able to be comfortable with who you are and who you were created to be, I think all of us go through those phases of, man, I don't feel certain, I feel different, I feel not accepted. I think those are things we can all identify with, but what's our response to that? Should we rush to hormone surgery or hormone therapy? Should we rush to surgery, to these other options? When these things weren't really an option, for lack of a better term, it wasn't popular to be trans. And so, and as much as I want to have compassion, it's now that it's not just popular, but it's also something that we can, hey, you can be a passable man or a passable woman. Looking at it, it's like, okay, but is that a moral net good for society, especially looking at suicide rates for people who are trans? And I look at that and I go, okay, just because the technology has brought us to a place where we can do this thing, is the outworking of it a positive for all of society?
You're kind of bringing up an interesting point, right? Because what you're saying, or what I'm hearing when you're talking about this, is there's two paths to look at this. One is because we've made technological advancements, do we just go ahead and indulge in this person, or do we go ahead and say, hey, recognize that you're feeling a certain type of way right now. How can we help you best deal with your internal issues?
Right.
Rather than trying to adjust the external.
Absolutely. Because the external doesn't get fixed anyway. And a lot of people, that have successfully transitioned, or that even, you know, look like they are the opposite gender. So many personal testimonies of, I thought this would fix everything and make me feel better, but at the end of the day, I still, it's almost like an imposter syndrome. I don't feel the way I thought I would feel once the transition happened. And it's like, okay, a lot of people are uncomfortable in their bodies, whether they're overweight, whether they're, you know, feel less masculine or more masculine, you know, the homosexuality issue. There's, you know, just hair color, you know, skin color. Like there's so many places where we as people can be insecure with what our bodies look like. And at the end of the day, making sure that we're okay with who we are, making sure that we still value ourselves, no matter what the exterior says. Do I still feel valued as a person? And that's where I go back to, having the Christian perspective of, we are all valued in the eyes of God. And when we understand, hey, I'm a child of God, I am valued, I was uniquely created, I was developed in my mother's womb by a creator, you know, those type of when you get away from the simplicity of that, I think we run against, well, who says I'm valuable? I don't feel very valuable. I don't feel like I matter. And in that bigger discussion, it's like, if you know that you're valued, you know that there's a creator that cares about you, because some people have terrible parents who don't take care, and so they don't feel value from family or friends, and they've never really felt love, and that's where my heart goes out. It's like, man, I want to make sure that you know that you're valued and loved as you sit right now today. Yeah. You don't have to change anything on the exterior to make yourself valuable. You are valued as a person right now.
I don't disagree with you in any way, shape, or form in that sentiment.
Sure.
Life is valuable. And I get why people push for the trans to do these things.
Yes.
Because they're trying to be compassionate.
Right.
And I'm just not 100% sure I agree that it is compassionate.
Sure.
Sure.
Right. From their perspective, they're trying to be compassionate. Yeah.
From their perspective, they're trying to be compassionate.
Right.
I'm just not sure it actually is compassionate to because that's almost disrespecting that person.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in, when you're an adult and you want to do these things, I think you should be able to, I'm going to respect your decision to do whatever you want to do.
Absolutely.
Ultimately, you're a human. I'm going to treat you with respect because you're a human. And I'm not going to sit there and say you can't do the X, Y, or Z. I guess my stance is forcing other people to agree with you is where I have my issue.
Right.
Is if you want to do it, I'm going to respect you.
Yeah.
But if you decide to do it, you can't expect everyone to go along with you either.
Sure.
I think that's the fallacy that they're trying to push on people.
Sure, and the compelled language and that sort of thing. Yeah. And
well, speaking of compelled language, did you hear about England? They arrested that one dude for the Facebook post.
I remember. Was that around the pandemic time?
No, this is just recently, like within the last week, I think.
Oh, okay. I already had heard of a few other incidences. Count Dankula got arrested for it was some sort of hate speech, and I can't remember what it was. He posted, it was so stupid. It was dumb of him to do, but like get arrested. I think he put his dog in like an SS uniform or something, or made a meme of something like that, and so they arrested him, and because they don't have free speech in UK.
No, they don't. So are you sorry, we're going off topic. I think we hit IVF fairly well, so I'm going to go ahead and expand out as we continue talking. Sure. Are you a free speech absolutist?
How does that work itself out? Again, I go back to, I love a lot of the libertarian ideas, but how does it functionally work itself out?
That's actually my stance as well.
Yeah.
Because there are certain things, right? Yeah. So like calls to violence, obviously, they should be censored.
Yeah.
So while I love the First Amendment, it does give you the freedom of speech. It does not protect you from the consequences.
Right.
However, there are certain things that are so egregious that should not be said. And as a society, I think we all have a basic understanding or basic premise of what those things should be.
But again, who decides that? Who draws the line? And that's where it gets real touchy as well. It's like something that's hateful to you may not be hateful to me, or vice versa.
What I'm saying is, like, there are a basic premise that regardless of who you are, you would agree with. Meaning, like, everyone in their right minds would be violence against children is not something that you should be talking about.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
Now, when you expand out, I would agree with you. Who decides that?
Right.
At that point, it's like, no. If there are conflicting, opposing views on something, then I think free speech should be allowed, because the marketplace for ideas is freedom of speech.
And I think we underestimate the way free speech works itself out. Is if I'm free to say whatever I want, a lot of times that stuff works itself out before it hits the public forum. Oh, yeah. Like if I'm sitting here and engaging with you off mic and I say something outlandish, just to see how it hits, and you have a look of shock and horror on your face, I can read your cue and go, oh man, that didn't hit the way I thought it was. I thought he was just going to laugh more, or I thought it would be kind of, and a lot of times in our day-to-day interactions, the ability to have free speech works itself out because, hey, I'm bringing this idea to the table. Oh man, I've tried it with 5 different people. They were all horrified by it. Maybe let me rethink my position.
Yeah.
You know, and again, I tend to want to err toward free speech on a lot of stuff. And you talked about violent speech. Okay, well, what about free speech in the time of Nazi Germany? Would it have been okay to call for a violent overturning of somebody like Hitler? And so
I didn't.
That's why I liked your specific about violence against children specifically.
Yeah.
But yeah,
because you have to be specific on it, right?
Absolutely.
Because there are times and places where the conversation of take Trump's assassination attempt for example, right? There are people on 2 very opposing sides, whether or not that was good or bad. Right. To me, it's unfathomable that it was even good because he's a human.
Yeah.
Sure, he might be considered a dick by most, and you might hate him and you might think he's the Antichrist or whatever. The simple fact is he's a human.
Yeah.
To me, it's unfathomable that you would take the position of it was good for that attempt to happen. Right.
But I still agree with your right to say it.
Exactly.
And most things, and here's where my perspective is unique, is I grew up being a Christian, and I was always told free speech has to be included to everybody, including people who were mocking Jesus Christ and people who were mocking my religion, everything that I stand on, everything that is my moral foundation. I grew up and I saw calls and mockeries of Jesus Christ, of the church, and ultimately I looked at that, and then as an American I had this underlying, hey, free speech has to be free for them to make fun of your religion so that you can also, be free to say whatever you want. And my freedom to actually be on a live broadcast, edited, not really edited, broadcast, to be able to speak about who Jesus is, about being able to preach the gospel. That's not allowed in every country. So in order for me to have my right to speak freely about my beliefs and what I think is important, I actually have to allow those people who have criticisms and even flat out mockery of what I believe. And in that place, it's like, okay, I will let you say what you want, because ultimately I believe my position is true, and I stand so firmly on it that I think once that marketplace of ideas shakes out, I will be proven correct at the end of the day. So yeah.
You are willing to take offense.
Take offense as far? Oh yes, as far as
right.
I
remember watching a clip of
because
Jordan.
some things I say may offend somebody else.
Oh yeah,
and so if I'm allowed to preach the gospel, that might offend somebody.
Yep.
So I have to go, okay, if me preaching the gospel offends you, then that means I have to allow you to offend me as well.
Exactly, right. So Jordan, I remember watching a clip of Jordan Peterson actually doing this, where the interviewer was asking him a question, and she says, well, don't you think people might find that offensive? And he's just like, well, yeah. In order to have like a free conversation, you must risk being offensive.
Yes.
And he pointed out, you're not taking any, like, you're not turning it down, and it's been really uncomfortable for me.
Yeah.
You are being offensive to me, right?
Right. So, I remember that conversation. Yeah. You're not afraid of offending me.
Yeah. You're not afraid of offending me, so why should I be afraid of offending you?
Right.
And I think that's where a lot of this controlled speech is coming from, is people are saying, you cannot offend me. Well, no. And if you're alive, if you have a brain, if you are willing to push ideas, you must risk being offensive to someone, and you must accept being offended.
Yeah. And again, I go back to, I'm not going to use every word because I have worked on trying to tame my tongue, but ultimately I saw, it's funny because there's certain, our age and culture is like fill in the first, what this word starts with, and then word at the end, the N word, the R word, the F, the F word, and so it's funny because I've seen kind of like our generation has almost got conditioned to like the fill in the blank word. And then I've seen multiple times with people of the younger generations of 21 and under, they're just flinging it. Yeah. And it's just like, it's kind of refreshing for me to see, not because it's like, oh yeah, say that word. It's like, no. It's nice to see a new generation coming up who isn't afraid of offending people, who isn't afraid of, I'm going to say what I want, and I'm not going to self-censor myself. Now, if you want to censor yourself, again, for myself, because of morality, and hey, the Bible says to tame the tongue is wisdom, to make sure that you're free of speech that isn't uplifting and good for other people. That's my position personally. I'm not trying to put that on anybody else. And if you want to have the freedom to say what you want, I think that's the beauty of America.
You're coming at it from a religious perspective, where I'm actually coming at it as a respect for a fellow human perspective.
Sure.
Meaning, like, I know certain words offend people.
Yes.
So why would I go out of my way to be blatantly offensive when I already know that that's offensive? Like, to me, that's kind of going back to where your freedom of speech is already self-regulating in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. Is you already know it's going to be offensive, so why even say it?
Yeah.
Some people want to say it.
Yeah.
Some people don't want to say it.
Right.
It's like,
Well, and I remember, again, that 90s art, they pushed the boundaries just for pushing the boundaries' sake. Literally, Ice-T had a song called Cop Killer. And, what else did Marilyn Manson was out there, pushing against Christianity. And some art was out there just to push the boundaries. That's why a lot of artists did what they did, was we exist to push boundaries. And unfortunately, a lot of artists have lost that sort of edge. Not every artist has to be edgy, but you should have the freedom to push boundaries.
Tom MacDonald's a prime example of a modern artist that pushes boundaries. Mm-hmm. But you are right. I mean, NWA, when they came out, they were pushing boundaries hard. And in from my perspective, I thought they were pushing the correct boundaries as well. Right. They were pushing forward a movement that really needed to be pushed forward.
Yeah. That's why we have the parental advisory tags on the CDs, was because of their albums.
Was that Bush that did that?
No. It was Al Gore's wife, Tipper Gore, that went before. She's the one that got the parental advisory. Which is funny, that was a Democrat at the time saying no. To think of how the parties have changed. Yeah,
but that actually kind of falls in line because Democrats want to control speech. They've always wanted to control speech.
That actually, you're right. That is consistent. But just the fact that they were had a moral reason for it.
Oh, yeah, fair.
Not okay. Don't expose the kids to it. Which I do agree with. Ultimately, the parents should be the ones that decide that. But hey, as a parent, here, just so you know, if your kid's trying to tell you that this is a nice, good, clean artist, the parent doesn't know.
No.
What's Primus? I don't know what that is.
Yeah. No, but you're kind of hitting right on the topic of what DDL is actually supposed to be, which is discussing that. Oh, there we go. We lost that battery. We'll have to charge that in between on our next break. But sorry, I lost my train of thought. Okay, got it. DDL was designed to talk about what dads can do to help progress their children's lives.
Yeah.
What's acceptable. Because it ultimately is the parent's responsibility in order to produce the next generation. It's not the government's responsibility.
Right.
So while my parenting perspective is going to be drastically different than Void's was, it's going to be drastically different than what yours is going to be. I think there is a premise or a fundamental agreement between all parents, which is we know our value systems and what we find important to pass down to our children.
Right.
Does a parental advisory label really need to be on there? It's a good warning for the parent, just in case they're not up to speed on what's going on in the culture.
Right.
Granted, I noticed a huge difference between like my parents and me.
Yeah.
Which is my parents, like my dad, huge in the country, hates rap. Hates the fact that I like rap. Would not let me listen to it, which made me want to listen to it more.
Absolutely. Whereas
with my children's music is very similar to the music that I want to listen to right now anyway.
Yeah.
So it's, I don't necessarily need help from the government in any way, shape, or form because I already know what's going on in the music sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's actually beneficial for my children and I to have similar tastes in music because I'm not going to push them away. I'm not going to make them go into the rebellion. Obviously, they're going to rebel anyway because they're teenagers, and that's what teenagers end up going and doing, right?
I don't know. I was always a good kid. I never.
But I think that's one thing that our parents' generation kind of lacked, which was they didn't fully understand and they pushed more and more children into rebellion.
Sure. And well, I mean,
Will Smith's song, parents just don't understand.
Right. Well, I remember actually, it's funny because the PG-13 movie rating system came out when I turned 13. I might have just dated myself there. But the rating system came out the year that I turned 13. Before that, it was PG and it was R. And PG had a lot more stuff going on that should not have been available to kids. And so as much as it's something the government got involved with, well, at the end of the day, I kind of like the rating system because it's like, hey, not only do we have a rating and where we kind of think maybe your kid should be, and hey, maybe you have different sensibilities than us, but also the rating system is going to say, here's what's going to be in this movie. There's going to be language. There's going to be nudity. There's going to be sexual content. There's going to be, whatever it is, and blood, gore, violence. And so all of that stuff, it helps to give the parent the ability to make an informed decision of,
is this appropriate?
Is this appropriate? Now, my mom, she let us kind of watch whatever. Now, she was careful. Like with me, she let me watch R-rated movies when I was a kid, and she just kind of let me experience it, and I kind of enjoyed it, and I appreciate that. But there was also stuff like Pet Sematary. She knew I loved pets. She was like, I'm not going to let you watch that. And for me, I fought it. But ultimately, I went, you know what? My mom lets me watch everything else. And so I knew even then as a kid, she's protecting me. And so I'm going to honor her decision because she lets me. She
gave you the freedom, so when she stopped with the freedom, you knew something could be
right.
And I'm not disagreeing with you. I like having them available and having that queue definitely is real. I think is a net positive.
Yeah.
I was just trying to point out the differences of the generations and why that came about.
Yeah,
it's a little bit different back then versus now, I think.
Yeah.
From the parents I know and how involved they are with the children and what they understand of their children's lives. And I think a lot of that has to do with social media and being more, we grew up with computers. We were the first generation, whereas our, so we have a jump start, right?
I just had a flashback to dial-up internet. Sorry. Just the trauma. This is just the sound of it all.
Just the sound, yeah. Oh, gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was over at my mom's the other day, and she was, oh, my God. well, my email's on the computer. I'm like, okay, well, we need to get it off the computer. I'm like, no, that's not how it works. I'm trying to explain it.
Yeah.
And she's just like, but it's on the computer. We get rid of the computer, someone else gets it. They can wait. I'm like, no, that's not how this works.
No.
I'm like, well, we need to take it and put it on the new computer. I'm just like, well, okay, well, let's go log in.
Yeah.
Well, don't you need one of those thingies? And I'm like, what thingies? And she's just like, so you can pull the file off and put it. I'm like, it's not a file.
No.
Like,
yeah.
But like, my kids are not going to have that issue with me.
No.
Because like we're all dealing with the same technology.
Yeah.
Sure, there are things I'm not super great at because they spend more time with technology, but there's not going to be that gap.
You say that now.
It probably
it won't show itself now. It's when you have grandchildren and
I'm sure.
And your grandchildren are just going to go, Grandpa, just move out of the way. Let me do it. And you're going to go, why is this lighting up? I don't know what's happening.
Fair.
Yeah.
I could agree with you on the grandchildren.
Sure.
I'm not sure my children are going to do that.
Hopefully not.
Whereas I'm going to
do your best to stay informed. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Times are changing. And this, like how we started on IVF and we've rambled through a bunch of things, and it seems like we live in such a fast-paced world. We live in such an information age that pretty much any topic really starts tying in with all other topics. And I mean, we talked artificial wombs, we talked artificial intelligence, we talked IVF, we talked abortion, we talked ethics, we talked moralities, we talked emails. I mean, I find it impressive, and I do encourage dads, fathers, parents, uncles, brothers, sisters, whatever. I encourage everyone to have a free conversation with people, right?
Yeah.
We're all very similar. We all have a lot of the same desires. I think as humans, we all are looking to be accepted.
Sure.
And unfortunately, as you stated, humans kind of are negative, and we have our prejudices. We have things that we think that should be the way things are.
Yeah.
Some more so than others. And unfortunately, we fail to respect the differences between us.
Right. And with the humans being a net negative, I'm not talking value-wise. I'm talking from like an X's and O's, ones and zeros type of computer program perspective. Now, again, that gets me into, as far as Christianity, I know for a while when I wasn't following my faith, I was a net negative to society. I was sleeping around. I was being promiscuous. I was drinking. I was not behaving in a way that benefited anybody's life, and I was a detriment to my own life. And then when I came back to faith, in that, it's like, okay, then I started to feel like I had value, I had worth, and then I started to see the value and worth in other people, and I started treating them well. Yeah. And that's where I look at certain faith systems, where I look at Christianity specifically, and it's like, it's funny how we can look at humans and go, man, you're a net negative sometimes when you look at the statistics. However, God cares so much about us from a value standpoint, one-on-one. And I think we as Christians can do a better job of letting other people know, hey, you have value. You have, on an individual basis, every person has value. And sometimes Christians have erred on the side of, well, I need to let you know judgment and all that stuff, instead of like, hey man, let me know you have value first, and then maybe we can have a discussion about some of that other stuff. And so when I say net negative, I don't mean from that perspective of value. I think every human is valuable. But if you're running the ones and zeros, man, we mess some stuff up, myself included. I've been very guilty of that.
So when I say we're a net negative, I'm taking a look at the overall society of humans.
Sure.
What we do to other animals, what we do to the planet.
Sure.
We are a destructive force.
Right.
I'm not saying we don't have value. What I'm saying is...
And I wasn't saying that either. I was trying to clarify my position.
You're good. No, so I want to clarify mine as well, so people understand what I'm trying to say.
Totally.
We are a destructive force on the planet. We're a destructive force to the land, to the vegetation, to the oceans. We're a destructive force to the animals, whatever.
Yeah.
So when I say we're a negative, we don't. So actually, you know what? I'm. You okay? Okay. So everyone knows that I'm dating someone. That someone does not live in the country. I've made that apparent. One thing that is drastically different that I notice is the way agriculture is done. Now, in the U.S., we do a lot of mass production, whether it be for milk, whether it be for corn, beans, whatever. We have a very industrialized,
biggest bang for your buck. Yeah.
We pack as much as we can in a very small amount of area, and we don't care about what we do necessarily to the land and to the animals and everything around it.
Right.
Which is, there's positives and negatives to that, right? Because we do have to supply a large food source for the people that are living in it. So agricultural development, there are some positives with being able to scale up to that size. However, there's also a downside, which is, like, I look at her country and I look at how they harvest coffee and the care that they put in to the environment. And it I don't know how to say it without sounding kind of weird. It is almost impressive and a little bit overwhelming how much care they put into the environment while being productive to society.
Right. And I think logically that sort of makes sense too, because the better care you take of the land, the more you can use the land for future generations as well. If we take care of this now, we're going to see benefits down the road. Yeah.
So I'm not a fan of like EPA. I'm not a fan of FDA and stuff like that. I'm not a fan of city dwellers telling people who live in the country how to take care of it. Because have you ever been to a one of these climate change or seen photos of like these climate change rallies where
I've seen the jets.
They're flying on the jets. But I'm saying, like, they do this rally or they do this protest or whatever. And then you take a look at the photographs from after when they leave, it's just trashed. They are, they like to say one thing, but they treat the environment so bad. But then when you go and you take a look at the farmer that's raising cows, do you know how much love and care that these people put into their cows?
Right.
While yes, there are some that are bad. Don't get me wrong.
Right. And that's where industrial farming versus, or corporate farming versus personal farming are two totally different things.
Totally different things. There's this one guy I watch who actually does educational videos on his farm. He's got like 150 head of cattle that they milk. And he's actually going through and talking about like the different aspects of what they do and care for. And it's impressive. But then you get like some of these larger dairy corporations that don't care about the animal and how bad they are. So I mean, it's interesting how we can go on that.
Yeah, and that's where, like I said, we as humans are capable of good. We're capable of doing good and being kind to each other and being invested with one another and valuing one another. But unfortunately, that takes sacrifice. That takes me setting aside my desires all the time and making sure that I care for the needs of other people. And again, the only reason that I do that is because of the relationship that I have with God. Now, I'm not saying that's the only way anybody can do it, but for me, that's the most effective way. And logically, it works out for me that way. Because if I just try to be a good person, I'd be like, but what's the point? Logically. Yeah. But with my faith background, it's like, man, because we can treat other people terribly. We can treat people as though they're commodities, as though they're recyclable, as though hey, you're just here for now. And I think oftentimes, unless we're kind of tapped into something bigger than us or a system of sacrificing for the next generation or sacrificing for somebody else, we really kind of tend to be selfish. It's the natural flow. The natural flow, the easy thing to do is just, I'll take care of me. And, you know, if you're a jerk to me in the next car lane over, I'm going to flip you off. Or, you know, if I'm going to get my butter and my milk and you're in the way, it's like, I'm not even going to look at you or acknowledge you. But what's self-sacrifice is to go, hey, man, how's it going?
Yeah.
And so I think those are the moments of connection, person to person, that we could all be better at. And, hey, let me take some time out of my day and see how my fellow man's doing. See how your day's going. Hey, what's going on?
So I think it's interesting, like you say that you recognize that your morality and where you stem from is actually coming from from the Christian religion.
Yes.
And
specifically my relationship with God beyond, because I did the religion thing for a while, but it wasn't until God really spoke to me and got a hold of me personally that I was like, oh, wow, this is different than that system that I was raised in, you know?
One thing I've always thought interesting is, so I have a lot of respect for like Christianity. I have a lot of respect for Muslims. I have a lot of respect for any of these major religions, right? Because you cannot have a moral framework that does not stem from a religious framework. So even though I do not like religion per se, I fully recognize that my moral framework stems from mainly the Judeo-Christian foundations. Right. So I really have a hard time struggling with atheists that come up with like this, oh, if you think about it logically. Well, no, you can't think it through logically.
Right.
Like there are non-logical steps you have to do in order to be a moral person.
Yes.
So
yeah, because it doesn't make sense to sacrifice myself
Yep.
for other people.
Yep. Makes sense to sacrifice yourself for family, but not for others.
Right.
But yeah,
and that goes back to, you know, I heard somebody say it this way, the way new atheists kind of believe. It's, somebody said the reason that you have because new atheists say, well, I don't need a God to tell me that what I'm doing is wrong, but ultimately, why? It's because you have a society and a framework here in the West that stems from Judeo-Christian values. Yeah. The reason that you know killing is wrong and you wouldn't do it is because of the Christians that came before you. Yep. As much as you don't want to give them any credit, that's why you think that these specific things like racism and, you know, rape and murder and all of these terrible, awful things are terrible, because it's not implicit within every society. Yeah, there were societies that conquered and grew because of those exact things. 100%. So yeah,
Roman Empire.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Mongolian Empire.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of summed up exactly what I was trying to say.
Oh, okay.
That was awesome. So,
I didn't mean to steal your.
No, you're good. You're good. That you articulated it very well. What I was trying to illustrate as well. So,
yeah,
I mean,
it's good.
It's good. We're coming up on an hour. I think we might just end it, and get these batteries charged, and get at the next one.
Get these batteries charged too.
Yeah. All right. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. Till next time.